So guys, welcome to the first episode of first live stream that I'm hosting on Instagram. It'll be available on Facebook and YouTube as well. So today we will be talking about, we'll rather be asking the question of whether or not our schools are divided based on race and gender, and if so, how do we deal with it? So today we have Tuhan with us. Tuhan is in fact the youngest to complete BSc and SEMA, and he's currently working as a consultant in a leading strategic consulting firm. And so he's accomplished a lot at such a young age and is a valuable member of our youth. And he's also a regular star of Channel TV Seetalitala program, their primetime television program. And so, Tuhan, tell us, how do you feel about this topic? And do you really think it's important, status quo?
Yes, hi Aathif. Thanks a lot for having me and thanks a lot for your invite. So, like you very correctly said, I do believe it is a very important topic because I was exposed to a lot of experiences about 2,500 to 3,000 people in the last 6 years while I was doing so these two plus another LLB. Plus, I was working like 4 industries: computer science, media, consulting, and higher education. So, I met a lot of people, and what I saw was that there is a bit of racism. Maybe they are doing it unknowingly, but there is, and we need to tackle this issue so that we can more focus on bigger macroeconomic issues that the country really need to focus on, the issues that developed countries are focusing on. And if you're wondering, if the viewers are wondering, I know my background doesn't fit this kind of issues. Then what I realized was that Aathif invited me. You see, there are people who are gender study specialists, religious leaders, but while they are specialized at it, things like gender issues like related to religion, those are things that everyone should have a life skill on. It's like driving. There are Formula One drivers, but everyone should have that skill. So this is why I want to talk about it, Aathif, and I'm really grateful to be here. And I look forward to having a great conversation with
Thank you,
you
Tuhan.
and come up
Thanks a
with a
lot.
few solutions as well.
Thanks a lot for coming out to this show. It's actually, you're a valuable member of our society, and thank you for being the first guest here as well. So, Tuhan, let's get started with the questions. So, Tuhan, uh, let's talk about history. In in our Sri Lankan education system, history is quite an important aspect, right? But a lot of the claims is that despite the fact that our history is, very rich, it has a lot of cultures. We're very famous around the world for our history specifically, but our history doesn't include only one side of the story. It talks about other aspects too. And so a lot of the liberal media tells us that our history is whitewashed, and it just gives a single story of a single community. What do you have to say about this? Do you think that that sort of distinction exists? And if it does, do you think it would be better if we, at least give one chapter per textbook for the other communities?
Okay, so I went to a government school. I went to Nalanda Vidyalaya, which I'm definitely proud about. And so it was compulsory for us to learn history. And in that, I didn't see any discrimination per se in what they were saying, because I remember I learned everything from all the religious leaders of all the religions fighting against the British Empire. There was no issue in terms of the more contemporary topics, I would say. But in terms of the history of like 2,500, what I see was that, of course, the Sinhalese has given a more, I would say, more number of pages in terms of the history book for the
Yeah,
in the history book. But I won't say that is unfair. Let me explain why. Because they have been like 2,500, so the history, of course, the content would be longer. But that doesn't mean that just because there are less number of pages for other religion, it is okay for any other religion to discriminate them, because it's at the present we all are here together, and now we are Sri Lankans regardless of how many years we have been here.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I don't think there's any reason why. I mean, history book, of course, history is always I would say the narrative is always biased in history, not just Sri Lanka, all over the world. But
Exactly.
history book per se, I don't think the issue, but I think the issue is in execution, because when you study history, when I went Nalanda, so Sinhala people, I mean Sinhalese, we are only learning about the history of our people because the community is only Sri Lanka, Sinhalese there, and probably in a Muslim school, the community is there only Muslim, so they are only focused on their history. Instead, if the problem is in not being together, like international schools where everyone is together, I don't think there's an issue in the book per se, but the issue is in the execution of not all of us are staying together while we are studying that.
Exactly. So yeah, I do agree with you. Definitely, significant amount of the pages or content or the syllabus has to be given for the Sinhalese history because obviously it's much more broader, much more wider. But these are just claims, what people have to say about how racism stems from school. So let's talk about something else: compulsory learning of religion. Now, if we see compulsory learning of religion, we see that in schools like Zahira College, they make it Islam, and in your school, I suppose it must be Buddhism.
Yes, only
And
Buddhism.
other schools that are they're based off a certain religious entity, they base it off of the said religion. So my question to you is, should we keep it that way? I mean, obviously we know in Sri Lanka we have dhamma schools, madrasas, places where the students can go into depth about their particular religion,
Yes.
but a school allows us to learn about all religions, which allows us for better understanding. So do you think we need to have a bit more of an incorporated aspect, a one country, one syllabus setup, or have it individual? What are the perks and benefits of keeping it the current method?
Sure. I think that is a big no-no for keeping it individually, separately, and I think it should be a much integrated syllabus, but it should be done in a more, I would say, strategic way. So if you take content from different religions and put it together to one book, that won't make any sense because the terminologies are different, the words are different, the languages they are written in is different. So instead, what you could do is, like for an example, so I can speak to Buddhism. The Buddhism book, only except for those Jataka Katha we have, it's mostly based on principles of Buddha's life. About the question that we get is, what can you look at the Prince Siddhartha's life and use it for leadership? So if you could have one kind of a book that talks about, take the principles out of all the religions, because what I see, so I have been associating a lot of people from different religions in the last 5 years, and what I see is the principles of each and every religion, it's same, just that the manifestation is different. So if you could take all the principles and put it to a one book and just give a heads up on different religions as a one religious book, that would have been much better. Because if you want to teach the religion to a kid of their parents, then they can send you what you very correctly said, to Dhamma school or different places, or get it from the family itself, than rather than taking it in a school. So it would be more inclusive that way.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I know that for a fact that Buddhism is quite philosophical in their approach, but I think despite Islam being mainly based off, because I speak for Islam because that's what I am aware of,
Yes, yes.
despite it having a lot of Arabic text, I can assure you that it could be translated. A lot of it can be translated. You can take the most important messages out of it. So yeah, I do agree
Exactly.
with you. That is a good approach for us.
Like if I take
So
an example,
yeah,
Machang, say in Buddhism you say don't kill animals, the first precept. And even in Islam it says the same thing but in a different manifestation, like be on a,
exactly.
so exactly. So it's just the manifestation is different. Principles are
It says
same
don't kill
everywhere.
innocent animals unnecessarily. You know.
Exactly. So yeah.
So next question to you is, um, do schools today have racism? I mean, you of course you've been in one of a very popular government school as well, so you would know. I mean, for me, currently the school that I go to, I don't see a shed of it because it's very incorporated. We have folks coming from multiple nations, in fact, so that has never been a problem. But a school that has been named for a certain community, certain society, do you think that the environment in your school is toxic in terms of racism, and do teachers have a big contribution to that? It's actually a good question that came into us from Akilaya. So yeah.
That's a really good question, and I think that is the elephant in the room as well. So I
Yeah.
think Sri Lanka, I wouldn't say people. So this is yes and no both. For first part, do we have racism in Sri Lanka in the schools? I think people are doing it unknowingly. So, for an example, when you take a single only school or Muslim only school, since there is only that type of community in that school, it is just the human nature to get that us versus them mentality. So, with that, people are getting bred that racism culture. They're not doing it out of they're not like consciously thinking and doing that, but people are doing that, and I have seen firsthand how people are treating to other community. Not that they won't
Exactly.
discriminate, but
Exactly.
just that the
Yeah,
environment help
but
do that.
from my experience per se, like I was in a community school in Oman, which is a Sri Lankan community school, but still a community school.
Okay,
I personally did face a lot of racism from my side, and
okay,
why I say that is because a lot of people would, you know, even if I messed up at the basketball court, no matter what happened, they would blame it on religion, right? They would bring religion
Okay.
into it. It's an international school, yet I was called names that I shouldn't have been called. So I think that,
Yes.
but this was not at all junctures. We have a few people few perpetrators of such, crimes. Uh,
Exactly.
it's just those people who we need to identify, the bullies, I would say.
Yes.
People who the parents influence them, I say all children are innocent. It's just when you grow up, you influence the wrong way. That's actually a very good question that we had. Are schools racist?
Yes. And if I can add on just one more line to that, the issue comes in. So when there are, say, when you go to the community after being in only one race group school, so you are more comfortable with dealing with people in the same region or same
Hmm.
race because you don't know anything about other people. So when you are
Yeah.
bred like that, when you go to the community, I mean, they're not discriminating per se because that person is from a different region. They're just more comfortable with working with same people. So I think that is the mentality that we need to address and to try to integrate in a more strategic way, which we'll get to the end of in the end of this discussion.
But I think in terms of integrating communities within school, it's definitely going to be difficult. Now, if you go
Very
to
difficult.
the Kamadulla, you see that the students there primarily are Muslims. You go down south, they're primarily Sinhala Buddhists. So you can't expect them to understand the ways of the others unless if it's brought through education, unless if it's brought through things like, now that we have a lot of technology, virtual calling between schools. You see that happening between schools in India and Pakistan. There are opportunities open to us. We just need to capitalize on them.
Yes. Yes. And I will get back to solutions at the end. So what we can do about it?
Yeah. So let's move on and talk about, you know the other elephant in the room. Why are
Okay.
schools still divided between girls and boys? So tell me, do you
I
know
honestly
why
don't
that?
know
We
any
know why.
reason.
We know the race issue, but why is it that we're divided into girls schools and boys schools?
I honestly don't know any reason why we did that, and I think that is one big mistake. Just like the divide being divided by religion, that is costing us the economy and our country. Because when I was in, so Nalanda is a predominantly a boys' school. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
boys' school, and where you are with the boys, of course, there's no issue. I mean, you can do whatever you want. It's just fun happening. Then I went to
Hmm.
the British Council for the first time, and I was in grade 7, and so it's in Sri Lanka there are only girl only school as well, and international school people did not really want to learn English per se.
Yeah.
Because there were people from girls only schools and boys only schools, and none of them talk to each other. They don't even sit with each other, and that's such a miserable place to be in because that also affects your confidence in the long run. And when you actually start, I mean, British Council, okay, if you lost a team activity, that just stops there. And when you actually go to the university or in a work activity, when you can't collaborate effectively with someone and can't bond well and vibe well, it costs to yourself, your career, and even the economy in general. So I think that is such a bad mistake that we have done. And quoting Mahatma Gandhi again, religions as well as gender should live together to understand one another.
I totally get that, but I think no, I understand why schools should not be divided. For me personally, I am comfortable talking to any girl, right? Because I've never been in a boys' school alone, so I've always understood the other side of the story, been able to have communications, and even things like consent. I it's a very confusing topic, but when you have more conversations, you're more comfortable understanding what it is. And you have cousins and friends who go to boys only schools, and you see them, like struggling to even ask what's the time. I understand that, but
Yes.
let's talk about why this might have been implemented. I mean obviously people would have implemented it for some reason, not like they do things blindly. When it comes to race, obviously there was a significant reason for politicizing it, but at the time when it was implemented, the feminism movement wasn't really up. So and it still isn't as big of a thing in Sri Lanka. You still see male dominance in a lot of aspects. So I don't think there would have been a political reason. So let's talk about practical reasons. I think a lot of parents have problems with premarital relationships, you know and that's kind of a reason why they don't want mixed schools, because to reduce the possibility of it. But here's my thing: if you are in a school that has kids together but also teaches kids about the importance of responsibility, you put all kids together, there's something gonna happen. But if you teach the kids about responsibility and talk talk them into explaining, why if a guy and if a male and female talks to each other, and if our teachers don't stereotype it and say, okay, you are in a relationship, and they understand that it's just friendship, I think
Yeah.
the kids specifically would be like, this is my friend, so I understand the other side of the spectrum. Let's just see how it works, and they can implement that sort of knowledge in the future, right? It helps a lot, especially having dialogues from both sides. It would definitely drop abuse cases a lot. Number of abuse cases would drop significantly when there's better dialogue. Don't you think so?
Exactly. I definitely believe in that, and I mean, maybe there's a practical reason about age constraints and safety reasons, but being in a school is more secure than. See, when I was in Nalanda, there were so many girls' school around us, and Nalanda, so there were like I think 7, 9, 10 schools around us. So them being in a school is a much more safe environment than being outside. So I don't think it make any sense anymore to be like that, being divided by gender. And of course, when you're together, you get to that male people. I don't know, it's unfair to stereotype, but we are, I think, more aggressive in terms of what we want to do, and being together helps us to understand and also be more, I think, more complete humans. Because I remember this one story from a board meeting one of my search had. So apparently there were three gents and one lady, and the gents wanted to fire this particular person, and lady wanted to find out why that person did this thing. And apparently he had a issue with the family, so he wanted the money. And also, if it hadn't been for that person, if there hadn't been that dialogue, that person's entire life could have been destroyed. So I think this inclusivity of gender is one important thing that we need to address as soon as possible, I think.
Exactly, and I think uh, if we are to move towards a more integrated society where we focus on providing opportunities, like, see, this is going to move towards bit of the capitalistic socialistic argument, because of course you say women, feminism, economy is all connected to each other. So I am somebody who believes in, if you give everybody the equal opportunity, there is no need to give them equal for equality, in terms of
Yeah.
what they get. You give them the opportunity, you give them the bat and the ball, you see how hard they practice and how hard they strike. You can't expect everyone to score six, no. So if we
Yeah.
are to do that, if we are to create better dialogue, give equal opportunities and things like STEM education, there's still the issue of STEM education. If we guide both students towards the path, you can go this way, you can go that way, I think the needs for feminism would be eliminated. I'm not saying feminism is bad, but the whole purpose of feminism was so that at some point feminism would be eliminated, such that equality will be gained. So our target is to eliminate feminism, and that is to the way we do it is through achieving better equality.
Yes, so true. I mean, feminism is the voicing out the issues. I mean, real feminism, not those posh people trying to say stuff on Instagram, but
Yeah,
real
not the
feminism
purple
is
hat
to
freaks.
and the goal for real feminism is to give more opportunities. And when you give opportunities based on meritocracy, based on talent, people would of course find their own path. So I mean, eliminating feminism sounds a bit harsh, but the goal is to remove the opportunity for remove the problem in a way that calls for the feminism.
No,
So
but the
solve the issue
purpose
so
of
that
the
it
purpose
won.
of feminism is at some point to make it useless. Get it? Because if it's useless, that means there is equality in the society. There is no need for anybody to fight for equality. You
Exactly. So
already have it.
solve the issue in a way that there's no need for feminism.
Exactly. So the end goal is to eradicate the issue of disparity, and
Yeah,
in the efforts of eradicating disparity, you also eradicate the reason
the
for a
need.
feminism movement to exist.
Yeah, true that. But need to be sure what feminism is. Feminism is about what most people don't get is, when I say feminism, it's like removing all the joint members of a community or a committee and put all the ladies. That's not feminism. Feminism, it's in
That's
essence, is
positive
about
discrimination, which is also still
that is
discrimination.
discrimination. Actually, the goal of feminism is to give people the opportunity. If they have the merit, just give it to the same person. If they would have had they given it to a gent, give it to a lady. That is the essence of feminism.
Exactly. And I think now that we're slightly on the topic of positive discrimination, let's go spend like 5 minutes there. So I think positive discrimination
Mm-hmm.
is bad because, see, if you say a company has to have a 5% quota of women compulsorily, a lot of companies do have that. If that was the case, the probability of 5% of women at hierarchy positions, it would, you can see the owners of companies, people like CEOs and all, sending in their people that they know, influencing that position rather than giving it to the best women out there. And so what we see happening is women going into the position who are unfit, and ultimately the blame comes out saying that women are not fit at all. So rather than giving the
Yes,
best
so
out of them,
true,
we give the
so true.
worst out of them.
Yes, that is so true. And I think what you said is perfectly right. The quotas and those percentages of getting women or even other cultures per se is actually a lousy effort to show that they are being gender inclusive.
Hmm.
Instead, but most of the companies that I applied to and I worked with,
Yeah,
they are having more holistic policies where they don't care about. I mean, they sometimes ask you not to send in your gender, religion, your age even.
hmm.
So they only look at what you are, what you have done, and hire based on that. So eventually, when you do like that, the sample would be, in a way, it would be equally distributed rather than uh, trying to force a percentage, trying to look gender inclusive instead of actually trying to be inclusive.
That's true. That's true. So I think we've actually addressed most of the issues that we've had in terms of, boys and girls, different schools, different races. And I really think in terms of our society, especially what you have in Colombo compared to other rural aspects, you see that we have come a lot forward. But in terms of,
Yes.
and I'm very sure a man versus woman issue would not erupt a big, a fire in our nation, because as 50%, 50%, you don't, there's no majority minority there. But I think the race issue is very important as of today, seeing as though internationally as
Yes.
well, seeing what happens in France, the actions of few perpetrators have put a lot of people in jeopardy. I think it's important that we explain to other communities what the others are thinking of. Better dialogue, in fact. And I think that, the women in our society, even things like gender uh, pay gap, it still, stems from the school. I think, you see to boys' school, as a high probability teachers will say, Apota, why don't you go with math stream? Yeah, and then you see with the girls, they say commerce stream, Mehema, they just tell the students what to do, and nobody's forcing
Yes.
them, but it's just that culture that we have. So that would bridge
And I think
issues like
that
STEM, and
if I
ultimately such that we cannot blame gender gaps based on discrimination.
Yes, and if I just say why teachers say that, I mean, it's unfair to say that to teachers because they are probably doing it in a really good intention. Because I mean,
Exactly.
most of the teachers
Good
I have
intention.
associated, except for like 1%. But the thing is, teacher is also someone, I mean, if I say it in a very delicate way, teacher is also someone who tried to be an engineer and couldn't, and why they are a teacher most of the time. I mean, nobody studied. A lot of
Yeah.
teachers I spoke to, they never studied to be a teacher and become a teacher. So it's unfair trying to tell that they are doing it in a wrong
No,
way
no,
or
no,
try to
they're
blame them.
definitely
They are
not
doing it
doing
in
it in
good
the wrong way. I mean,
intentions.
if you see why a lot of teachers
But
say ask girls not to do go into things like engineering is because of the practical aspect. You got to work night, and then in a
yes.
country where Sri Lanka, where safety is always an issue, they'll be like, do a MG or thing, we'll
Yes.
have problems definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. So, we've talked about the issue, and a lot of people talk about the issue, but I think what's important is we get to the point. How do we fix the issue? That's
Yes.
exactly why I wanted you in here, because I know that when it comes to solution, you're one of the best people to seek advice from. So let's start with race. Let's go, Tuhan. What do you have to say?
Sure. Sure. I think I can. The solutions. So when you invited me for this, I took about a day and I thought about like an evening and how we could integrate, and I came up with this integrated, inclusive framework that we could look in. So that's what I call it. So where both gender and race could be addressed by them. So if you try to be inclusive and try to recruit students for grade one from both genders and all the races, that would be a huge mess because people in old ages they would definitely discriminate them, and like perpetrators, the few people would purposefully like build a fight and try to fail the entire system. So that doesn't work. But instead, it should be in a more holistic approach in an ongoing way. So where, for an example, I say take a school where there are Buddhist schools, Muslim schools, Hindu schools, Christian schools, and all are genders. So what they could do is integrate all of them in each and every grade. In a way, all of them learn together. But then comes the issue: what happened to your friends? Because you are staying with those friends for years, and there would be a big issue of them not meeting friends, and there would be a huge cultural shift. So what you could do is have that in a way where, for an example, A school is Buddhist and B school is Muslim. You integrate them in all their grades. So half of them study in one school in 1 week, and other half school in, so they're in the same vicinity, right? They school in the other school, so they get to meet the people, they get to learn the other cultures, they get to stay together, and there is no discrimination, because it would be, if you take one given school, it would always be 50-50, or if you take all the regions, it would be based on the numbers there, it would be it would have the same representation as opposed to one grade or one school having a majority. And same applies for gender, where you integrate the genders as well, schools with gender as well, same way. So the key here is to make sure that they go to different schools in different states, so they meet the people, they stay inclusive, and they also, there's no any overwhelming majority of one type of race in one school. So that is the
So
integrated
for that sort of
approach.
approach, I mean, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but
Yes,
to
yes,
every approach we have hurdles, right? And to
yes.
this approach, I think a biggest hurdle would be the practicality issue. Things like, transport and things like, obviously you're going to have opposition coming in from parents and all. So how do you think we'd able to combat something like transport in such a scenario? Like if we want
Transport,
kids
I
to go from
won't
one school to
see
another,
there's
and if we look
any
at places
issue
like
because,
Hambantota, where it's primarily single Buddhist, how are you going to achieve 50%, 50% down south or
sure. So I
east
will
or something
first
like that?
address the first issue, which is logistics. See, when you see Sri Lanka Colombo schools, they are scattered around the same place, right? Royal Thurston, Vishaka Museums, Nalanda, Ananda, Sahira, all of them in the same place. So just a,
Yeah,
1 kilometer maximum distance. So in Colombo, I don't think the issue is a big
yeah,
issue.
not in Colombo, but
And outside, what you said is, I think I disagree on. I agree to disagree on the fact that Hambantota, because so my parents, they are from Hambantota, my father, and his friends he has friends from Muslim, he has Hindu friends, so it was, I think their people have less number of goals, less targets, less stressful, so they are living peacefully more or less, and the racism and the issues, the few perpetrators are actually coming from the Kalambu, because we
no,
are the
I
people who
I did
are.
not talk about racism stemming from Hambantota, but the ability to achieve a 50-50 because of population spread.
There, I think, Machang, it's
Because
already
I mean,
inclusive.
compared to it, Machan, like 70% of our community is definitely single Buddhist. So there
Yes,
is no way you can achieve 50% even if you wanted to
not
in
50, but you
nationwide.
could
But a good
not
integration
nation.
is possible. Yeah, I
I
agree.
think Kalambu, we should focus on that, because I mean, the Pareto rule, right? 20% causes the 80% of the issues. So if you could integrate the 20% of schools in Kalambu, the rest would take care of themselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
And in terms of the parents, of course, that should be done in a ongoing process. You can't do it overnight. You should be doing like pilot schools and see its progress, then communicate it one by one. So that way parents also will see how their children are more inclusive, less stressful about other religions, how they are more accommodating, how they are, outgoing. So that way parents also would start to see that when you do it in an ongoing process.
So seeing as though now how our schools work right now is, suppose we take Zahira, it's just that school, the funds come into the school, they take care of whatever happens. If we had to have a system where we move around a lot, that means a lot of working with each other is important between
Yes,
administrations per se. And along with that, if it's a
yes.
lot of moving around, there's definitely going to be an incurred cost. So how do you think our economy would be able to facilitate such a method or such a strategy? Along with that, do you really think our administrative capabilities, seeing as the Sri Lankan administrative capabilities have seemed to fail over and over again at many instances, do you think we will be able to take over such a very difficult task?
It won't be that difficult if you look at it in a more pragmatic way, because it sounds very bizarre when you think about that. If you
Hmm.
make clusters, for an example, say Thurston, Museums, and Zahira, those two schools, and those two are in Royal, because they're already inclusive. Those schools and Vishaka, just to add another girls' school, if those five schools are working together, I mean, it would be the same teachers who would be teaching. It's just that the students who are going would be different. So there would be a huge administration issue, but in a long run, to give equal opportunities and equal funds to everyone, maybe the government could look into making a centralized fund administration like it does in education, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the United States, so that the funds would be equally distributed to all schools, but the teachers and only the students would meet. So there won't be any administration issue per se.
And definitely thanks to 21st century technology that makes that step a lot easier, that allows for
Exactly. And the
exactly for
locations
video
could be
communication and things like
automated.
that. Dialogue is much more easier.
Yes, the locations could be automated, the timetables could be automated. It's just a matter of handling funds in a way. Also, that also comes in towards the latter part of the integration process.
Yeah, that sounds very good. So that is integration. That is the future. What about the present? A lot of
Sorry?
people do have. The thing is, now we know that in the future, by having greater integration, we can combat the issue of this issue stemming over and over and over again, rather than it being
Yes.
something that keeps coming over and over again. But a lot of our community right now, students migrate. I'm doing my A levels. A lot of students migrate. They have their minds fixed. So temp right now, because we have to take care of this generation as well, because in the next 10 years they would be the parliamentarians, future politicians. How do you think we could
Mm-hmm.
help them understand the viewpoint of one another, especially through social media? Because we talked about schools, but our students, you see them, they are on Instagram or Facebook a lot of the times. So through an innovative method like that, how do you think we'll be able to grab onto them?
Sure. So for the people who are abroad and people who are not, it's already schooling, right? Or towards the latter part of the schooling.
Yeah.
So I think our answer would be threefold. So first would be, I mean, even though we are not in the school, we have our sisters, cousins who are in the school already, right? So when we are staying with them, because most of the part time we would stay in the family, like Singapore did, they first tell the other smaller kids, so they would take that learnings to the home. So that won't be a big issue. And
Exactly.
second would be that, so with the government's plan to make universal education after school, when they go to university, people in Sri Lanka also, there wouldn't be a big issue if we actually try to integrate in a way that we actually want to integrate rather than trying to show we integrate. So that also won't be an issue. And people who fly abroad, Masha, I think they are the least racist people I see, because they are with people from different countries, different religions, different viewpoints. And of course, they are also a minority there, so they don't try to go and boss around. So they are also used to being, so they feel like what it's like to be discriminated. So they are, when they come back, I think they are the least racist people I see, for their exceptions, but as a majority, they are very accommodating and less racist
Yeah,
or
yeah, I
sexist.
completely agree. So now we talked about how we can do it in terms of grassroots levels. We talked about how we can do it in terms of social media. But I think schools and the process of education isn't it's not extended only to the 25 or 20 and below. There's always room to grow. There's always room to educate. Even a 70-year-old can learn new things. So and in fact, I somehow sadly mean politician, I mean the parliamentarian age is significantly higher than other countries. That's the sort of problem that you see in Southeast Asian countries. So if we are to target those people, the people who right now actually have power through education, seeing as the education is a very important tool, how do you think we could target them?
For them, Machan, I think, especially the parliamentarians. So I will take this example where I heard this one of the prominent parliamentarians, when they come to the national media, one of the TV channels, they talk about how good their faction is, their paksha, and how what they have done and on. And when they came to this prominent youth-based radio channel, I heard that they are talking about how they could come into politics, how they're helping youth, and how youth should be more inclusive. So the parliamentarians, most of them already know that it's bad to discriminate and they should be more inclusive and it's hurting the country. Just that they know and they're trying to be ignorant about it. So I don't think we
Yeah.
have to educate them per se when their
No, I'm not saying
the issue
parliamentarians
is with
per
the
se.
kids,
I'm saying, telling
the older
how
generations.
uh, we have a lot of people above the age of 35, 30 who are in power. Forget about parliamentarians. Parliamentarians are 245 folks. If I'm not wrong, 245, I'm not sure the exact
25.
number. Uh, but I'm saying, most of our CEOs, people in power, people who actually give us advice, family bearers, a lot of them are the older folks, and
Yes.
and in our Southeast Asian culture, we listen to them. No matter
Yes.
what happens, we are not, as independent as we would like to say. We still listen to what they say most of the time.
Yes. Yes.
So, how do we tell them?
So
For instance, how would you explain this to I assume that your parents are very well, you know, uh, appreciative of
educated.
multicultures and very integrated society. I'm talking about our regular folks.
Okay. So for regular folks, I'll break it into two parts. So first part was the parliamentarian, the people in power, people educated people. They already know that they're just they don't have the
They're ignorant of
opportunity
the fact.
to, they can't execute it, because if they try to be more inclusive, they would be discriminated by their own race then. So they
And
just try
along
to
with
be
that, they will
ignorant.
be losing their opportunities that they have. That the
Exactly,
older
I was
people
trying to
need
say.
power, so they don't want that to slip
they
away.
they would lose their opportunity if they try to be inclusive. So if you try to build it in the grassroots level, we would give them the environment for them to be inclusive. And for the people who are less educated, and I mean, there would always be people who are like that, right? People who just don't get it, and people, I mean, no mask people in US. I mean, whatever you do, whatever try to educate people, they won't get the goal. So in
Yeah,
those
there's
people, I
always
think
that
people,
bell graph. Now, in the middle people, you have those who
exactly,
have medium education. So those are the people we are targeting.
those people, I think we need to once again show the results of how this goes.
Hmm.
There are different ways that you could communicate. The one would be the results, the thing that most of them would get. And also, I think if we can build the culture with our religious leaders, because those people are very they got the blind faith into their religion. They don't even know what they're fighting for, they're just fighting for that. So if our religious
Exactly, exactly.
leaders,
I see that. I see that a lot from.
if and
I
they
see that
listen, and
in all communities they have that problem. Don't you think so?
exactly, and even in the politics, I mean, that's an entirely different topic. So, if the religious leaders could say that, the countries be more inclusive, try to be more inclusive, try to be less discriminated, I think they would listen to them, because more, except for the people who are perpetrators who are purposefully doing that, which is a really large majority, most of the people who had that blind faith can be turned, or can be more inclusive if the leaders tell them how to behave, because they listen to them.
Yeah. So you can influence them positively, unlike how it's usually done.
Yes, exactly. Positively influenced, because they won't understand themselves and do that. There's always case like, there's always people like that.
Yeah, that's actually a very good approach. So I think, Tuhan, we have actually addressed every single possible scenario. Talking from young kids, those who are at higher stages of education, those who have just passed out, those who are broad, those who are older. I think it was a very productive conversation we had,
It
and I
was,
think
it
it would be
was.
very great to have another conversation like this with you. And yeah, so I'd like the viewers, before we end this live, so I'd like the viewers to know that we will be having this sort of setup. I hope to have this sort of setup every week, and so I will announce a speak along with the topic prior. So if you have your questions that you would like to put, you can always send message, or if you would like to appear on a next week episode, or something like that, just you can always contact me. And I'd like to thank Tuhan once again for spending a lot of time, a very busy person, on such a thing. I hope it all goes well for Tuhan. I hope we can implement such things in the future as well. And yeah, thanks a lot, Tuhan, once again.
Sure thing, buddy. Thanks for having me and giving me this opportunity to communicate it to a lot of people, because we are coming from, at the moment, to different places. I mean, we don't feel it ourselves, but we are representing to people. And for us being able to communicate this message to both races, I think that is a great opportunity that we got. And really thankful for having me. And I really hope that people would get a message out of this and try to be more inclusive, so we as a country could prosper and focus on the issues that we really should be focusing on.
Thank you, Tuhan. All right, guys, have a nice day.